You're listening to Big World Network.
Just Kill Me, Season 2, Episode 9, The Brain Room. Written by Wendy Herman. Read by Wendy Herman. Trevor vehemently denied breaking into my apartment and taking Freya's file. In fact, he seemed genuinely upset that it was missing and blamed me for the whole thing. When he told the director that I had let it get stolen, Pixley seemed more bored than concerned, which screamed to me that he had not only orchestrated when the file came into my possession, but he had also controlled when it left. I got the message that Pixley was sending. I was only supposed to get a sneak peek, and if I was stupid enough to fall asleep with the file right out in the open, then, well, I didn't deserve to know what was in it. If I was a decade younger, I might have had the presence of mind to copy the whole damn thing to a flash drive the minute I'd walked into my apartment. But my brain just didn't work that way. I was starting to think I was getting too old for this shit. It would seem I was being left to my own devices to find the information I so desperately needed. Why Pixley couldn't just call me into his office, sit me down, and say, "Agent Ripley, get comfortable, because I'm going to tell you everything you've ever wanted to know about Freya Douglas. Would you like a vodka tonic?" was beyond me. Why couldn't anything ever just be easy? If only I could ask Freya herself. Clearly she was more in the dark about her past than I was. I realized my passion to find out the truth wasn't just to satisfy my own curiosity. I needed to find out who Freya was for Freya. Several attempts to call up the 20-year-old memory of my inexplicable breakup with the love of my life had failed miserably, although I did succeed in giving myself a whopper of a migraine. It seemed that if the flashbacks, or whatever they were, continued, they were going to come when they were good and ready, and not a second before. Needless to say, I was going to avoid operating heavy machinery for the time being, just in case, and maybe roller coasters. I decided to check the FBI database one more time, although I'd done so exactly 7 times already, with no luck. This time I had something new to type into the search box. Winkle Labs. To avoid any passers-by viewing my computer screen, I went down to the brain room, or the central database computer room, where all of the updates and repairs to the system were done. There were generic computer stations there, kind of like at the public library, and there was never anyone there but the brain herself. Ainsley Crease was very possibly the smartest alleged full human on the planet. I say alleged, because there was speculation by the Trekkie sect that she was an android. She had helped make several modifications to the NASA computer system 10 years before, when she was just 15 years old, and one NASA official had been overheard telling another that she was smarter than their computers. She had never received any formal computer training. She'd been recruited by the FBI before her 16th birthday, and had never graduated high school. But there was a rumor she was building a working replica of Optimus Prime in the old renovated warehouse that she lived in, and I believed it. We called her Brainsley, or just Brain, and she didn't seem to mind. In fact, it was a bit like trying to communicate with an alien. Brain's first language was computer. She spoke to humans only when she absolutely had to, and I was no exception. I stepped through the door and closed it behind me. I was in a small room with a second door and an access panel. I scanned my FBI identification card and heard the lock on the door disengage. I pushed the heavy door and immediately heard the loud humming of all the computer equipment and technological gadgets inside the massive room. I couldn't name them all if my life depended on it. Heck, the only things I recognized were the computer monitors and the chairs. Brain was there in the far right corner, sitting facing the door at the main access terminal that controlled the whole building, more or less. Inner office security systems, internal and external surveillance cameras, every desktop computer, the cash registers in the commissary, even the sprinkler system. She stopped typing and held up 2 fingers without looking up. She wanted me to go to terminal number 2. As I headed toward my assigned cubicle, I couldn't help but be awed at the speed Brain's fingers were moving on the keyboard. I couldn't tell what she was doing, but she was always making modifications, improvements, and or upgrades to the system. She seemed so at home in her custom-made ergonomic chair that it was almost like she was part of it, part of the machine she now so intimately conversed with. Her funky cat-like purple glasses had slid halfway down her nose, but she didn't seem to notice, and she had a lovely face that she never masked with makeup of any kind, her amber eyes sparkling as they reflected whatever it was she was doing on the computer screen. Her black curly hair was always pinned back in some way, away from her face, although tendrils escaped and cascaded along her cheekbones, and her voluptuous little figure was accentuated with her eclectic thrift shop fashion style. I didn't understand it, but I had heard several female agents say that she was one of the few women on the planet who could mix and match colors and patterns and make it work. It was just so her. All I could see from my vantage point as I settled in at terminal number 2 was a dark yellow blouse that matched the darkest flecks of her eyes, and her signature purple and orange knit fingerless gloves that stretched to her elbows. Freya had caught a glimpse of her once as they passed each other in the ladies' room, and had said she was hauntingly beautiful. I thought that assessment was spot on. Suddenly she noticed I was staring at her, probably with a stupid grin on my face due to my daydreaming, and the click-clack of her fingers on the keys stopped for just a second. I could have sworn I saw a slight blush as she quickly looked back to her monitor. Embarrassed, I looked away too, cleared my throat for no particular reason, and sat down at the computer she'd assigned to me. I might as well get this done, so I can get on with my day, I thought to myself, convinced I would find nothing but disappointment on the screen in front of me. Just for the hell of it, I typed in Freya's maiden name and waited for the screen to change. I wasn't surprised when the form that materialized was blank, except for the name and birth date. I went back to the search screen and typed in Winkle Labs. I waited. And waited. Suddenly, a message I'd never received before appeared. It said, "This terminal is not authorized to access this information." So Winkle Labs triggered something that I needed a higher security clearance to access. It was a roadblock, but a roadblock was progress. It was better than a blank screen. Just then I heard music. It was ethereal and Enya-ish. I looked around for a moment, and then the music stopped. I heard Brain quietly say, "Hi," into her cell phone. I turned back to my screen, unsure of what to do next. I heard rustling behind me, and Brain was standing, gathering her things to leave. I looked at her, and she glanced over at me. She stopped gathering and released a small, quick sigh. I think she'd forgotten I was there. Lunch. Brain had just spoken to me. I was stunned for a moment. "You have to go." 4 more words from the hauntingly beautiful android. I finally realized she was waiting for me to respond. I nodded. "I'm done here anyway." She surprised me when she engaged me in conversation a 3rd time. "No luck?" I was so flabbergasted I had to swallow hard before I could answer. No, I guess access to Winkle Labs is above my pay grade." Shit. Why had I mentioned Winkle Labs? So much for staying under the radar with my self-appointed assignment. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that Brain never talked to anyone. Maybe she would keep my secret. But then do I have to tell her it's a secret in the first place? What had I just gotten myself into? I don't want... If you could just not... I stammered. She had gone back to gathering and without looking up rescued me from my own verbal noose. "I won't tell," she stated, sounding almost bored. She slung her large purse over her shoulder and headed for the door. She reached for the knob. I thought I had to leave," I asked, confused. She froze and, moving nothing but her lips, said mysteriously, "Go back to your girlfriend's file." I didn't register what she was saying at first. "Excuse me?" I replied. She turned to me and smiled. She was even more breathtaking when she smiled. I was beginning to see the validity of the whole android theory. "You assume what you're looking for will be tucked neatly inside a text box. Look outside the boxes." She began to turn the knob, but stopped. "You may need to try a different terminal. I don't think that one is working properly." She motioned with her head ever so slightly toward her workspace, the central access terminal, and I saw her ID sticking out of the card reader slot. She was still logged on. Then she left.
You're listening to Big World Network.